Hey guys, welcome to Microtech, where we talk about technology and spending money wisely. Today, we're going to talk about the best budget iPad in 2024. We'll be comparing the iPad Mini 6 to the iPad 10th generation. I happened to get my hands on an iPad 10th generation recently, which is a part of the giveaway if you guys paid attention at the end of the last video. So that's what we're going to be discussing today in depth. So please pay attention, strap in, and let's get started. So let's start with the iPad 10th generation. The iPad 10th generation came out in 2022. It released originally at $450 for the baseline variant with Wi-Fi and 64 gigabytes. A lot of people weren't super happy with that because $450 for a entry-level iPad was considered pretty pricey, and a lot of people didn't buy it, believe it or not, even though it was updated in a lot of senses with newer features, newer colors, newer design. People weren't having it. But when they announced the M4 iPad Pros and the iPad Air, they announced that there would be a price drop on the iPad 10th generation. Now, inevitably, that price drop won't last too terribly long because they'll be releasing the iPad 11th generation maybe tail end of this year or even beginning of next year. But with that being said, let's look at what now is the cheapest iPad on the market. Today, the iPad 10th generation starts at $350 brand new for 64 gigabytes with Wi-Fi only. I'm going to be real with you, if you play your cards right, you can get it for far less than that. The iPad I have here, I got for $300 in cash, which was a pretty good steal for me. It had never been used, it had been literally turned on one time, and they never used it for their original purpose. Let's talk about some of the features that come with the iPad 10th generation. First and foremost, it's going to be an 11-inch display. One of the key features of that 11-inch display is it is a non-laminated display. I don't know if you can see here, but if you look just right in the lighting, there's a tiny gap between the top of the glass where your hands actually touch and the actual display itself. That basically is a huge difference between any other iPad in the lineup and the iPad 10th generation because all of the other ones are actually adhered directly to the display. I'm going to be honest with you, I've heard from many different creators that the laminated display is quite annoying. It doesn't bother me that much. Now I will say, with the way this iPad is designed, I wouldn't take it outside and use it, but if you're using it for note-taking, playing games, it works perfectly. In addition to that, you come with two storage capabilities, 64 gigabytes and 256 gigabytes. Those are the only two storage options you have. And the jump from 64 to 256 is actually pretty significant. I think right now, the jump from 64 to 256 takes you from 350 to 500. Now, I will be honest, 256 is a pretty good number to be at when it comes to an iPad, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of note-taking, documents, or maybe even filming. You'll want that storage, but if you're just playing games and consuming content, 64 is enough. In addition to that, it comes in 4 different colors. We have this one here in blue, but it also comes in silver, pink, and gold as well. And I think those colors are great, honestly. I think they're bright, they're pretty. I think this blue here has a really nice finish to it. It's not too aggressive, it's not too dark, too light. I think it's, on my opinion, it's the Goldilocks of blues. In addition to that, you can get it with cellular if you'd like, but to be honest with you, the cellular, I don't know why anybody would pay for that for an iPad 10th generation. I don't know why you'd spend $10 a month on that. And of course, from there, you have the 12 megapixel camera here on the back. But that's just the basics of the iPad 10th gen. Let's talk about what differentiates it from the rest of the lineup. We'll talk about some good things and some not so good things. Firstly, you have a landscape camera. This was the first iPad ever to put the landscape camera on an iPad. Before, when you would want to FaceTime somebody, or if you were, I don't know, really FaceTime or, Messenger FaceTime or WhatsApp, whatever, it would have to be on portrait mode. And oftentimes, depending, you either hold your iPad like this, or you would have it and they would put you in center stage, but your eyes wouldn't be lined up to where the camera was. A lot of people didn't like that. This iPad changed that. Now when you're FaceTiming, you can hold your iPad up like this. There's the camera right where it's supposed to be. It's a way nicer feature. It's crazy to me that it took another 2 years for another iPad to come out with a landscape camera. That's honestly pretty wild. We also have USB-C. USB-C, obviously, it was one of the first iPads to go to USB-C after the original Pros. It's just great for universal charging. There's nothing special about this USB-C port. It's not Thunderbolt, it's just regular USB-C. So it's going to have USB-C 2.0 speeds, which I think is 500 megabytes a second. Nothing to shake a stick at, really. We talked about the non-laminated screen. It's also going to have the oldest chipset in an iPad. So this is going to have the A14 Bionic chip, which I believe was in the iPhone 12s back when they originally came out. So we're talking about a chipset from almost 3 years ago now. If you're just doing the things I mentioned, if you're just consuming content, taking notes, it's not that big of a deal. If you're trying to edit videos, it'll be a big deal. You will notice a huge difference between it and, say, an iPad Pro. From there, it is probably the least compatible iPad when it comes to using the Apple Pencil. I have the Apple Pencil 2nd generation, as you guys know, and if I'm being honest with you, I would never consider buying the Apple Pencil USB-C or the Apple Pencil 1st generation. I just think that it's silly. I think that ultimately the Apple Pencil 1st generation and USB-C are just stupid, whereas the 2nd generation that just magnetically attaches and charges is wonderful. But you can't use that with this one. And the only reason that those Apple Pencils even exist is because of this iPad. I hope that that changes when the 11th generation comes out, but it is what it is. I digress. It also has its own version of the Magic Keyboard, but it's not called the Magic Keyboard. I think it's called the Magic Keyboard Folio. It attaches at the bottom of the landscape portion of the iPad instead of actually being propped up with the charging port at the back. But it's honestly really nice for something you just want to hold in your lap to do work with. It's a great option, and it's also far more affordable than the actual Magic Keyboard would be for the iPad Pros or the iPad Airs. I'll show you here what's on this iPad. We pretty much use this one for just games and content consumption. This is actually my wife's iPad right now, so she's doing whatever she wants with it. She's a huge fan of jigsaw puzzles and Sudoku and word games. I let her do her thing. At the end of the day, it's perfect for what she wants it for. She brings it out at night when we're going to bed. I bring out my mini at night, and everybody's happy. But for the most part, that's the iPad 10th generation, guys. Great iPad, in my opinion, for the price, especially in today's world. But you'll see here, when we compare it to the next highest or next most expensive iPad, that there's definitely some competition in today's world. And that's going to be the iPad Mini 6. You guys have seen this now a handful of times on the channel. First video I ever did was on the iPad Mini 6. And I've said the things I like about it, but today we're going to do an actual deep dive into comparing them between the 10th and the iPad Mini 6. The iPad Mini 6 is going to have a higher starting price. It's going to start at $499 on Apple, but if you buy it from Apple, I think you're silly. You can buy it pretty much from anywhere else, like Walmart, Target, Amazon, or Best Buy for $399, or open box for probably around $360, refurbished for maybe $330. There's no reason you should be paying $500 for this iPad in 2024, especially when the 7th generation is being rumored to come out soon. But $399 is probably going to be a reasonable price. So we're talking about a $50 to $100 discrepancy between it and the 10th generation. What separates it from the 10th generation? Well, first and foremost, smaller screen size, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Smaller screen size does not necessarily mean that you're having a worse picture. It's just a different form factor. More portable. It's meant to be used for somebody who wants a bigger screen than their iPhone, but something that's truly easy to hold in the hand. From there, you're going to have 4 different colors, just like the iPad 10th generation. You're going to have space gray, purple, pink, and starlight. I have mine here in space gray, as you guys can see. It's the go-to color. It's the OG color of pretty much any Apple product, space gray. It also comes in the same space variants, 64 gigs and 256 gigs. This one I have here is 64 gigabyte model. For what I use it for, it's just perfect. In fact, I'll show you here. If we go into my storage, you'll notice that I still have 20 gigabytes left, and I constantly revolve things in and out of my iPad. If there's games I'm not playing anymore, I delete them and I download new games, and it works just fine. And it's also got the same type of camera, but the only difference between this one is that it's going to have a flashlight on it, whereas the iPad 10th generation does not. Let's talk about, just like with the 10th generation, what are some things that make it stand out compared to the rest of the models. It's only going to have a portrait camera, but this is probably the one iPad where the portrait camera does not fail it. Because of the size of this iPad, you can hold your iPad up just like this, have a FaceTime call, and it's not annoying. It really isn't. So the portrait camera doesn't do a disservice to the iPad, whereas it would on the bigger models. It's also got USB-C, same speeds as the rest of the iPads, besides the iPad Pros, of course, but it's great to have USB-C on a device, especially when now phones and all the other devices we're using use it. Laminated screen versus non-laminated. You can tell the difference, but really the biggest difference would be the anti-reflective coating that comes with it versus non-anti-reflective coating that comes on the iPad 10th generation. Unfortunately, if you look at mine with the screen protector I put on it does not look like it's anti-reflective, but I promise it is. The only big difference is when you're outside, it's gonna not suck as much to look at versus the iPad 10th generation. This is gonna have one generation newer of a chipset, the A15 Bionic chipset that came in the iPhone 13s. Great chipset. I've used it on my older iPhones. It doesn't do you really any disservice. It's a little bit snappier, but to be honest with you, it's not. The difference between it and the M1 chips are just so vast that it really doesn't matter. If you're buying this for its use case or its intended use case, you don't need the M1, M2, M3, or M4 chips. This one supports the Apple Pencil 2, so if you notice here, it's got the slot for the magnet. It barely fits it. The Apple Pencil 2 is almost longer than the iPad itself, which is kind of funny. It's almost perfectly fitted for that Apple Pencil. But the fact that it supports the second-gen pencil is just so much more convenient. You don't have to have a charging cord coming out of the USB-C port in order to use it. You can just plop it right on the top, it charges it, pairs with it, and it's good to go. This one doesn't have any keyboard support, actually. There's no keyboard support at all for the iPad Mini 6. Now you can get Bluetooth keyboards and use those separately, have your iPad propped up on an iPad stand, but to be honest, anything that would be designed to actually hold this and have a keyboard, it's just way too small. I think it doesn't need to have a keyboard. I don't think it's detrimental that it doesn't have a keyboard, but it is unique compared to the rest of the lineup. So what are my thoughts about both of these iPads here? I'm gonna get them out and lay them out here. Which one would I prefer? I actually have two varying answers here. The iPad 10th generation is the best for someone who just wants to have a device to watch videos on, play games on. It's really affordable. You're spending maybe $300, and it's gonna do everything you need it to do, if that's all you're asking it to do. I think it would be really good for students who want to take notes in class and want a cheap, affordable Apple product that may work well with their iPhone, AirPods, Apple Watch, etc. I think the 10th gen is a good move to make. But the iPad Mini is going to be best for content consumption and note-taking with the Apple Pencil. If you want to watch videos, if you want to play games, you can hold it in one hand. It's incredibly easy to use. It's a fun device to use. In fact, since I've given the 10th generation iPad to my wife, I asked her which one she preferred, and she actually prefers the Mini because of the size. There's no hate on the iPad 10th generation because, once again, the price difference is so vast that you can get this one for $300 or less dollars, new or basically open box new, whereas this one, depending on where you buy it from, you may spend $100 more. So really, it's up to you guys on if you want to spend a little bit more money, but I will tell you this, you cannot go wrong with either option. If you want a little bit bigger screen, go with the 10th gen. If you like portability, go with the Mini. But either way, the best budget iPad in 2024, in my opinion, is either of these. You just need to play your cards right and buy it from somebody you trust so that you can actually get a good, high-quality deal. Guys, I just want to thank you guys again for coming to watch our videos. Our channel is continuing to grow. We have our first video approaching 1,000 views. We're approaching 50 subscribers, which I know is not much to shake a stick at, but it's still very exciting. Please like, comment, subscribe. Please leave a comment on what your favorite iPad is and what you think the best budget iPad is in 2024. And I hope you guys have a great day.